Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to the UDRIVE webinar on secondary tasks while driving. We appreciate your joining us. We're going to hope that you'll be able to interact with us. We're going to have some question and answer sessions. I'll explain in a moment how you can answer questions. My name is Oliver Carsten. I'm the Professor of Transport Safety at the Institute for Transport Studies at Leeds, and I'm responsible, I have the overall leadership of the work in UDRIVE on secondary tasks. And you're also going to be hearing from my colleague, Laurette Guyonvarc'h from Lab. She's going to be talking about some specific methodology that Lab is applying to identify when drivers are carrying out secondary tasks. So this is the agenda for this morning or this afternoon for lunchtime anyway. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the UDRIVE project and to the work on secondary tasks that we're carrying out. Then I'm going to talk about the analytical approach, the major research questions and how we're extracting the data. Then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. Then after that, Laurette will talk about the auto detection software that Lab is establishing in the project, and finally, and then there'll be another question and answer session, and then we'll wrap up. So if you want to raise a question during or after a presentation, obviously your questions can be stored. You have in your panel on your screen a place where you can ask questions. So please put your questions there, and then subsequently we'll pay attention to those questions as the webinar evolves. So first of all, by way of introduction, what are naturalistic driving studies? How do they differ from ways in which we study driving in laboratory, in accident investigation, and so on? The main point about NDS, and they're a fairly recent approach to the study of driving because in the past the technology was not available to do it. It's about observing drivers in their natural habitat while driving, or maybe riders as well, with automated equipment. So typically connecting to the vehicle CAN bus that provides vehicle data, having video cameras, connecting GPS information so we know location, and then subsequently bringing all that information together in an analysis package where we can investigate different questions about how people are driving, about the quality of their driving, about the safety of their driving, about their eco-driving, and so on. And it's a very powerful tool because until very recently in particular we didn't have video, we didn't even have the possibility of video to record what was going on in the vehicle. So we had to, if you like, suppose what people are doing. Maybe we had recordings of various kinds. That's, of course, what we've had in field operational tests. But often those have been conducted without video. Now with video, we can really see what the driver and maybe even the occupants in the vehicle are doing, and so get a much deeper understanding of the human actions and how that fits in with the driving context. So in UDRIVE, we're approaching 70,000 hours of driving observation. These are the countries involved in the project, so it's a spread across Europe. It's a spread between the north and the south, east and west, countries that are better performing overall in terms of safety, and countries that don't perform nearly as well. In the Netherlands, there's 40 trucks equipped with UDRIVE, and those trucks are shared across drivers, so we get more than 40 drivers involved in the study. In Spain, we have 40 moped riders, so particularly of interest here is their commuting behavior and so on. 30 car drivers in France, 30 car drivers in the Netherlands, 20 car drivers in Germany, 30 car drivers in Poland, and 30 car drivers in the UK. So particularly for the car drivers, we have a good spread across Europe. Not every partner, not every country is represented, but we believe that we can look at some important safety differences between countries by examining the car drivers. And of course that's really important to policymakers. And we have one overall data acquisition system, DAS, that we're using. It's been adapted for cars, trucks and motorcycles, but it's based on the same technology. And we have one central database in which we're recording all the data, and that central database actually sits in Sweden at Chalmers University, and we can access that database remotely through the specific system that we've set up in UDRIVE. And of course the data is because it's personal and because it includes video, it's very highly protected as well. So this shows you the camera views that are available in the cars. It's slightly different in the trucks, but I haven't included that. So we have a front view with 3 cameras. Then we have the blind spot to the right and the driver view. The blind spot to the right is particularly relevant to interactions at intersections and with vulnerable road users. For the driver engagement and secondary task, the driver face view is quite important because that allows us to get some handle on where the driver is looking, where the driver focuses while driving. Then we have the driver feet view at the bottom left. That shows us, for example, if the drivers are anticipating a problem, moving their feet, lifting off the accelerator, hovering over the brake pedal, and anticipating a safety problem. In the middle at the bottom we have the cabin view. That shows us if there are passengers and if there's a conversation going on between the driver and the passengers. It's also useful for identifying seatbelt wearing. And finally, at the bottom right, really important for the engagement and secondary task is the over-the-shoulder view of the driver. And that allows us to see where the driver's hands are, whether they're picking up an object, whether they're eating, reaching for something, interacting with the infotainment system in the vehicle, and so on. So, and that obviously plays all the time during driving, or at least we hope it plays all the time during driving. So that's one of the central focuses for the video analysis that we're carrying out in this particular part of the project. In addition to those video views, we have, as I mentioned, the vehicle data. So we have GPS data on position, which can then be map matched to provide us with the road type and the speed limit, and so on. We have information, of course, on the speed of the vehicle from a number of places from the CAN and from the GPS, and we have information from a Mobileye sensor on the mounted facing to the front of the vehicle that identifies relevant if you like, threats as well as giving us indication on lane keeping. So it identifies the threats, the potential threats. This software was built for collision avoidance systems, AEB, automatic emergency braking, and so on. And it classifies those threats. So you can see here we're classifying cyclists, we can potentially, or pedestrians, we can classify cyclists, and so on. So we know where the potential interactions are, and we also know whether we're following another vehicle. That's again really important for engagement in secondary tasks and driver attention, because one might suppose that people might engage in secondary tasks less when they're close to a vehicle in front, because they might anticipate that that vehicle might decelerate suddenly, brake suddenly, and they have to react. So all of this is brought together in the software analysis tool, which actually is called Salsa, no connection with dancing, and this integrates all the data. We can, of course, extract that from that data, carry it over into analysis packages and into statistical packages, and so on. But one of the primary uses of that package is for annotation, where we have coders systematically go through the data and record items of interest to us. And in this part of the work, it would be engagement in secondary tasks and what type of tasks drivers are engaging in. So in terms of the work on secondary tasks, the major focus is on who, where, what, when, and how. And I'll explain that briefly. So who is doing it? Well, of course, the driver is doing it. That's sort of obvious, but we want to know what kind of driver is doing it. Is it a male or a female, a younger driver, an older driver, a Polish driver, a UK driver, a German driver, and so on. And we also have information, questionnaire information about the driver attitudes, their risk-taking propensity, and so on. So where are they doing it? Is it while stationary? Is it while driving on a motorway that's empty? Is it while driving on a motorway that's full of traffic? Is it on urban roads? Is it near a traffic light, etc., etc.? What are they doing? That means what kind of task are they carrying out? Are they putting on their makeup, combing their hair, eating some food, using a mobile phone, and so on? When are they doing it? In what circumstances are they doing it? Are they doing it while approaching a curve? Are they doing it while approaching the crest of a hill? As I said, are they doing it in high traffic or low traffic, and so on? And finally, how are they doing it? How are they managing the situation? Do they prepare for the secondary task maybe by dropping their speed, by falling back further from the lead vehicle? Do they, when the lead vehicle starts to slow down, do they react by dropping the task? So there's a lot of interesting things we can do with regard to that. So another way to look at it is that we are examining to what extent drivers are successfully, or you could say unsuccessfully, self-regulating. So now I'm going to move on to the analytical approach. How do we carry out the analysis of driver engagement in secondary tasks? So the first step, and it's very important to know that this is done by manual coding, the first step is to identify when the when the secondary tasks start and end, and to know what kind, who's doing it, and so on. So what we've done is we're doing this by manual coding, just to be clear. Laurette's going to talk afterwards about the possibility of doing it automatically. And we're doing it for a sample of trips for all the car and truck participant drivers. Why are we doing it for all the car and truck participant drivers? Well, because we wanted to represent everybody in our sample. After quite a lot of discussion about the sampling procedure, we decided it was, if we recruited somebody, we wanted to make sure that we were able to understand the possibility or the probability of that individual engaging in secondary tasks and the circumstances in which they might do that. So we're going through, for each individual, we're going through a sample of trips. So we're looking at the whole trip when we do the manual coding. We're not looking at every single trip because we just don't have the person power to be able to do that, but we are looking at trips for every individual. So all those drivers that I talked about, all those recruits are represented in the analysis. So then we want to code the secondary task type. And the main focus here, because now there's great concern about driving distraction. People talk about an inundation, a flood of, or a plague of driving distraction taking place. At least that's what politicians talk about. There's lots of concern that that's causing real risk and real safety dangers. So our main focus is on the use of mobile phones and other electronic devices, particularly in trucks, because they have it's quite common that trucks, delivery vehicles particularly, but any kind of truck has some kind of fleet management system in to assist the driver in making deliveries and to keep the driver to time and so on. We're also looking at the involvement of electronic devices. That's for car drivers. It'll be mainly the use of mobile phones, but not entirely. I mean, there may be other devices being used. And then we want to break the secondary task down into subtasks. There are concerns that some forms of interaction, and obviously there's evidence as well, some forms of interaction with mobile phones and electronic devices are more dangerous than other. So particularly visual manual tasks, i.e. things like texting, dialing, and whatever, are considered to be more risky than merely looking at a screen or talking on a hands-free mobile phone. Of course, we can't be absolutely sure that that's always the case. We need to confirm that from our own evidence, but it's very important that we identify the task and we look at whether drivers are, for example, taking away their hands from the steering wheel from prolonged periods of time, seem to be using the mobile device, if you like, as the primary task. One can suppose that in certain situations it's more important to the driver to be carrying on the mobile phone task, to be doing Facebook or whatever, or be texting, than it is to be driving, and we want to understand that. So we look at reaching for the phone, interacting with the phone, talking, reading the screen, maybe putting the phone to one side and glancing at it momentarily, or talking or listening on a hands-free device. And it's not always that easy to separate mobile phone tasks from other tasks. One of the things we've observed in watching the videos is a lot of people move their lips and talk while driving, or seem to talk while driving, but then when we look at the video for a little while, we can see that they're singing to themselves, that they're using their earphones to listen to music, and they're singing along to the music. And I guess in coding, what we've decided is actually we can quite clear, it's to a human observer, it's quite clear when people are singing and when they're actually engaged in a phone conversation, maybe because of the body movements and other things that go along with singing. So we can even make that kind of distinction. So then we want to know what kind of road people are doing it on. What's the environment in which people are carrying out these tasks? And we're doing that partly manually and partly by automated means. So we're looking at, for example, intersection approach and crest approach. That's done manually. Road type is partly automated. Day, night, dawn, dusk, time of day, in other words, is automated. We're coding whether the people are doing it while it's raining or dry. In other words, while the road surface might be slippery or less slippery, we're doing that from the wiper signal that we're getting from the vehicle, and we get traffic density from the sensor on the vehicle that I talked about earlier. So quite a lot of information about context, and of course we have to be aware that context can change during quite a long mobile phone task, so we need to note that down as well. So now moving on to our prioritized research questions and an indication of whether we're doing those for the cars and for the trucks together or only for cars. So one important research question to us is, what are the key factors influencing the willingness of drivers to deliberately engage in secondary tasks? So what's the prevalence of secondary task activity in driving? What specific types of secondary tasks do drivers typically engage in? And of course you'll appreciate that that's one piece of data that we're able to get directly from the annotation that we're doing to the driving. So we'll have some idea as well of how that's distributed then overall, and then we can look at it in terms of the complexity of the situation and how both the demand on the driving and the demand from the secondary task influence the decision to engage in secondary tasks. So here we're asking questions like, do people give up on more difficult tasks or not engage in more difficult tasks when the traffic situation is difficult? Do they choose to do their texting at relatively, I'm not saying it's safe, but at relatively sensible times as opposed to not sensible times? And I think we already have some evidence from the videos that not all the drivers are being cautious. So we have seen quite long periods of visual manual engagement in secondary tasks where the drivers are actually removing, or a driver is removing his or her hands from the steering wheel entirely. I've seen an episode where a driver was driving with his or her knees to do the steering, and then of course we can judge that to be, and that was on urban roads, so we can judge that not to be sensible, cautious driving behavior. To what extent is the willingness to engage in secondary tasks dependent on driver factors such as age, gender, and cultural factors? And cultural factors here means pretty much the country in which the person is driving. So we know that Poland, of the countries that we're collecting data in, has a worse safety record. We don't understand fully what's behind that, whether that's a problem of poorer traffic environment, poorer road design, or poorer driver behavior and driver attitudes, or maybe a combination of those two. And this will allow us to get a bit of a handle on those questions. So I've already mentioned we were looking at people's adaptation of their safety margins before, during, and indeed after performing secondary tasks. So looking at through the whole secondary task engagement, the whole episode, and looking to see whether drivers are changing their safety margins, slowing down, falling back in car following, on, of course, ideally, maybe even doing it only when they're stopped in traffic. Of course, even more ideally, not at all. So that mention of not at all indicates as well that one of the things we'll be able to look at is drivers who don't engage in secondary tasks. That's quite important as well. Who chooses not to do it in any circumstance, because of course those might be judged to be the most safe drivers. So moving on to the individual driver characteristics, how can we predict some of these behaviors from psychological tests and personality dimensions? So we've had a series of questionnaires that we asked of each participant to respond on that allowed us to investigate various personality characteristics and attitudinal characteristics. So, for example, one of the factors we're looking at is the well-known one of sensation seeking, which is an individual driver's, if you like, enjoyment, or an individual person's enjoyment of risky behavior. So people who are higher sensation seekers take more risks in general in various aspects of their life, including driving, and people who are lower are more cautious and more risk averse. And we've also asked people a series of direct questions about their attitudes towards speed and close following and so on. And then we can look at which personality dimensions have the strongest predictive value. We're using cluster analysis to identify clusters of our participants across various questionnaire factors, and then we can look at how well that might predict risk-taking behavior, including engagement in secondary tasks, because of course that allows us to tell the stakeholders, tell the politicians where they should be concentrating resources in persuading drivers to improve their behavior. So now we've got time for questions and answers. I'm hoping that there'll be some questions from you, so please feel free to ask me some questions. Can I encourage people not to be shy? We're hoping that you'll interact with us. Okay, I do have some questions now, and I need to find them. So one question, let me just make sure I can see them all because they were scrolling off. One question is about the effect of distraction on driving performance. Well, yes, we are looking at risk to some extent. We were originally intending in the project to particularly look at, do the kind of analysis that's been done in SHARP 2, looking at how risk in during distraction compares with risk when people are not involved in distracting activities. We don't have a big enough sample of safety critical events and crashes to be able to look at that. So of course, if somebody if there is an event that occurs during the samples that we've selected, we will be noting that event down. So if it looks like somebody has come really close to the vehicle in front, or had a very slow response time to a lead vehicle decelerating, or a pedestrian appearing in the scene, or whatever, then we would note that down. If they, for example, we would also obviously note down if they go through a signal or respond late to a change in traffic signal, and so on. Sorry, I'm just scrolling here. How many trips are selected per driver, and how are they selected? Well, they were selected essentially randomly. We've attempted to do several trips per driver, but it was a random selection. So we had a lot of discussion about this, about whether to do oversample longer trips or whatever, but we didn't really want to do that because we want to look at also, if you like, how trip length relates to and where in the trip the drivers are, in order to be able to identify what the propensity for distraction is. One thing, for example, one can observe in the truck drives is that very often there's more interaction at the end of a longer trip by the truck driver than there is earlier in the trip. And why is that? That's because they try and get more information about where they're to deliver their delivery. We're dealing mainly with delivery drivers, and also they often make a direct contact with the place that they're making the delivery to. So they might make a phone call or some other contact with the place where they're about to deliver a package or a piece of goods in order to alert them. So we might see differences there, and then that's a reason for looking at whole trips as well. And we don't know for sure whether people in short trips do less distracting activities than in long trips. I hope that answers the question. Will there be any work related to the effect of distraction on driving performance? Yes, I think I've already discussed that. As I said, well, we will look at whether people get into difficulties. We're able to look at, for example, driving behavior on curves versus straights, their lane tracking. We're able to look at changes in speed, changes in car following behavior, and so on. Did we detect crashes in relation to the secondary task? I think the simple answer to that is no, we didn't. As far as I know, we have extremely few crashes in the whole database. Personally, I'm only aware of one, and as far as I know, that wasn't related to secondary tasks. So I don't think we would, from this data, be able to come to any conclusions about real crashes and how that relates to secondary task engagement. And of course, one of the problems here is that we might have had, as SHARP2 did, the US naturalistic driving study, we might have had very low-level crashes. bumps with a vehicle, another vehicle in parking, or curb strikes, or so on. But those are not the crashes that in Europe we're concerned about when we really talk about safety management and road safety management and Vision Zero and so on. We're talking about crashes that's related to injury. And those are, thankfully, extremely rare. So chances of our, in this study, being able to really come to conclusions about how secondary task engagement, distracting activities relate to injury crashes, chances of that are very, very remote. We'd have to have millions of hours of driving to be able to do that, and we simply don't. The cost of doing that would be astronomical. So we have to find other ways to look at safe and unsafe behaviors. Why do we not include two-wheelers? Well, that's a really good question. And I think that's just because of the sheer difficulty of observing two-wheelers wearing helmets while they're engaged in secondary tasks and getting any reliable information on that. Yes, it would have been nice to do that, but we didn't consider when we started planning the project that it was realistic to be able to identify with any reliability whether a two-wheeler was doing something. Of course, we might get some information, but for example, information on hands-free phone calling would be extremely difficult to capture in that environment. So we decided to focus on car drivers and truck drivers. Maybe another study will be able to look at that. In terms of prevalence of secondary tasks, what measures or metrics will be used? Well, the main metric is per unit of time while driving for us. So what proportion of the driving time are people doing such activities? And of course, by having a sample, of a representative sample of all the trips in the database, we hope that we'll have a reasonably representative sample of what our participants are doing. Now, of course, there's the next question is how representative is that of the overall driving of all Polish drivers or French drivers or UK drivers? Well, that's a bit more difficult to answer. We can't claim that our drivers are necessarily representative, but we can claim that they are indicative, at least, of the driving habits in those countries and the driving habits of younger drivers, older drivers, males and females, and so on. So as I said, the main metric on prevalence is the quantity of time that people are doing it. Are there any plans to use the data for development of ADAS? Yes, in a broad sense, we are going to be thinking, particularly when we carry on the next or the final piece of work in the project where we're looking at countermeasures, lessons learned, policy implications, we are going to look at countermeasures for this. And I guess for engagement in secondary tasks, I guess probably people are aware that highly automated driving may be one way out of the problem that we have at the moment, the safety problem, risk problem that we have, that drivers really want to do it, but they can't, perhaps it can be argued, do it safely with current vehicles. So I guess in the future, automated driving may provide the solution to that, because it may allow drivers to get pretty much disengaged from driving for some period and to carry out secondary tasks safely because the vehicle can be trusted to do that driving. But I guess that's not, of course, our current study. I guess one could argue, of course, that that means that people should be doing naturalistic studies of automated driving as it comes out, just to make sure that drivers understand when and where they can do their engagement in secondary tasks with automated driving, that they understand that when they have to take over, they have to surrender a task, they understand that when they're under manual driving, they can't do the tasks or they shouldn't do the tasks. Okay, I think, well, I hope I've answered all the questions. You can continue to ask questions and we'll come back to them later, but now I'm going to move on to Laurette and ask her to make her presentation about how they're doing the annotation. So Laurette, I'm handing over to you.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So hello everybody, I'm Laurette Guyonvarc'h from the lab in France, and I'm part of the task on secondary tasks. And today I'm going to present what we are developing as a tool to detect automatically secondary tasks in the data. So as Oliver said, we are interested in studying the real impact of secondary tasks on driving, and in particular on driver adaptation of their safety margin while they are performing secondary tasks. So in order to do that, we desperately need a secondary task event, of course, and this slightly differs from occurrence studies because we really need a lot of samples to be able to provide good quality statistical analysis. So our need is to have the more secondary tasks possible, and then we will. It's really easy to find samples where no secondary task is ongoing. I'm sorry, so the different methods that are available to find secondary tasks in those naturalistic driving data are presented on that slide. So the first one, the easiest one I would say, would be to find secondary tasks in the CAN signals, which are recorded synchronously at high frequency. And as we have one variable recorded called multimedia customer action, we could use that one. So the problem with that one is that with this variable you can only access to onboard tasks, meaning the radio tuning or the air controlling or the touchscreen actions, and so you cannot access to all those other secondary tasks such as phone and all smoking and eating and all that kind of thing is not accessible. And another problem with that CAN signal is that even all the onboard tasks are mixed up together in the signal, and so you only have access to one common indicator, and so anyway you would need to have manual annotation on that signal to understand what happened, and as Oliver said, to find start and end of a specific task. For example, somebody is entering a navigation address on the touch screen. That could be only found by a human looking at the data. You cannot see it from the CAN signal. Then second solution, which is already done in UDRIVE, is the manual annotation. So with that annotation you have all tasks. You can use it for the frequency studies. It's a high quality, and you can have it on all the data for all the drivers, but it is very time consuming, and so at the end you get a quite small sample of data to do the statistical analysis, because whole trips have to be watched all the way through, and since secondary tasks are mostly rare events, you will not find many of them when you are looking to a whole trip. And so that's why we try to implement an automatic video annotation, which has the good part to be automatic and so I would say less expensive than humans. And in theory, it would be possible to process all the database in a reasonable amount of time. Then the disadvantage of that method are that the quality of detection has to be checked, and for our case that means we will have to go through manual annotation or validation of detection to be able to provide good quality results, and we cannot address all kinds of secondary tasks, and so we had to focus on one of them, and we chose, of course, as you may guess, on the phone secondary tasks. So how does it work? So the method we chose is based on machine learning algorithm using the video data, and this should or will or is already giving secondary task candidates, and those have to be then manually annotated to find start and end of the task. The main thing in that case is that manual coders used to have to look at the whole trip to find a secondary task, and in that case, if we provide good quality candidates, they only have to check and then find start and end of a task is quicker than just look for the task in the data. So the algorithm is based on HOG and SVN methods, so I will not go through that one because it's quite technical. If you are interested in that type of techniques, the company we worked with, which is called WASA, is presenting something about that in the next driver distraction conference taking place in 2 weeks in Paris, and so you will be able to see their paper and their presentation if you are participating. So once those algorithms were developed, they need to be trained. So you have to create a learning database, and that means you have to manually annotate some videos to tell the algorithm that was a secondary task and that wasn't. And then there is a phase when the algorithm has to be trained, and that could be long or quicker depending on the quality you need for detection. And then finally, when the algorithm is working, you can do the data processing. So for that study in the UDRIVE project, we specified that we wanted to detect texting on a phone and a handheld conversation. So you will only show a result on those two features. So what is getting out of the tool? So it's a frame-by-frame feature detection, so that means for each image the algorithm says the driver was texting yes, no. And then with that detection we have probability associated. We also have access to the position of the phone in the image, and all that was integrated into the Salsa tool that Oliver showed you. And what we added was an hysteresis for reliability enhancements. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. I hope everybody can see it. So this is the Salsa tool, and I will show you what we did in order to validate the performances. So the first step is to manually annotate data. So that's not for the training database, that's only to be able at the end to compare automatic detection with manual detection. So manual annotation looks like that, and that means that blue signal means there was a secondary task going on at that time. And then I'm going to show you what the automatic annotation provides. Should be around here. So this is the manual annotation, and then we plot the probability that's given by the tool. So it will be shown in purple. So as you can see, it goes from 0 to 100, and it varies among the time. And then you will see in a new color the post-processed signal using the thresholds. So that says when the probability is over a certain threshold, we consider it as a secondary task. So that's the red one, as you can see. So there will be a zoom. Voilà. So there you can see the detection getting out from the tool, sorry, and then the red signal we are dealing with, and in blue this was what was manually annotated before automatic annotation. As you can see, it's quite good on that data. So I say it again, those data come from pilot data from the French cars. Of course, it's not UDRIVE data, which are not accessible to other people and analysts in the project. And so with all that data, we can evaluate the performances of the algorithm. You can see all data available in the UDRIVE data, the GPS data, all the camera images. And this is a tool, this is the manual annotation tool that Oliver talked about also. So it's all integrated. And then we also have in those data, so there you can see the detection, so you can see it's on the image, you can easily check if it was a good detection or not. And I also have an example in that trip of a detection that the algorithm made and that the manual annotator didn't make. And you will see that actually you can consider it as an interesting detection compared to a human. So I'm going to it here. Here you can see you have no blue line, meaning no manual annotation said something was going on, and still you have that red line saying we think there is one. And when you check on the data, actually she's not phoning, but she's using a talkie-walkie, and that detection could be considered as a good one because it's a manual interaction anyway. So that's how it looks like. And so what I give is only preliminary result because things are really ongoing. It's really a hard time for us nowadays. So we did the evaluation of performances on our pilot data. We calculated confusion matrix, which gives a rate of false alarm and non-detection, and the results are promising. We still are wondering which indicator better evaluate performances, so we are working on that. And using that, we are also working on the thresholds for the hysteresis to be adapted to the UDRIVE use, meaning we want to detect secondary tasks, but since they are then manually annotated, we don't want to produce too many false alarms, and we don't want to miss too much data, so it's kind of a trade-off we have to make. That was for the French pilot data. Then in the UDRIVE database, the software, the tool is implemented. We already did some manual annotation to be able to validate performances on those data. So the difference between the two databases is that the camera are installed nearly the same way, but sometimes there are small differences in the installation, and that could have an impact on the performances of the tool. So we have to check in the real cars and along the time, do we have the same kind of result as in the pilot data. And then of course we already have, and it's still going on, a manual annotation of secondary tasks by UDRIVE partners, and those were done, as Oliver said, on random trips. But it's true that for statistical analysis we have a number of samples that could be enhanced, so we are waiting for new ones, and we hope this tool could be useful to have more samples of secondary tasks. So we have to evaluate performances of the tool on the database. We should have first automatic detection available in the few days, and we are waiting for more manual annotation. And then when we have all that, we will be able to do our study about secondary task impact on driving using a large set of segments of secondary tasks. And that's it. If you have any question. Oliver, I don't know if you would get the questions or if I should get them.
We should both get them.
Okay, I don't have any.
On the dashboard. No, at the moment there aren't any.
Okay.
We're still waiting. So again, can I encourage the audience, please, to ask Laurette questions. I'm sure there are some about this innovative process for identifying secondary task activity. There are people out there I can see. Oh, here comes one. Can you see it, Laurette?
No.
If you click on the questions.
No, I guess maybe they wrote only to you. I can't see them. You have to.
Okay. I'll go through it then. I'll read it out.
Okay.
Have you compared the manual automatic method with the one using CAN data?
Actually, the automatic annotation only tracks phone calls which are not in the CAN data, so we didn't do it, but if we have done it, we would have found that there is no correlation. We couldn't find it in the CAN data.
Yeah, and I think that was because of the kind of vehicle we're using in the trials. So the vehicles, I guess if we had a Bluetooth connection on the vehicles and that was commonly used by drivers, then we might have that information.
Yes, but that signal. So not all the cars are equipped with Bluetooth, and that data would be very hard to seek for in the CAN data. Then I see a new one now.
Okay.
And the question is, what is the performance compared to implementation by others? By others US projects. I'm not aware of the same kind of other automatic video annotation, so we didn't compare it. But as for now, we don't have any result on the UDRIVE database, so we will compare it as soon as we have enough work done. For now, it's a bit too early. And then, will you distinguish the use of GPS application on UDRIVE from other multimedia use? No, we will not. With that tool, we will not be able to do that. So, as you saw in the example, the algorithm cannot distinguish, for example, a talkie-walkie from a phone, or for a tablet, or any other kind of small device. And so, if we want to do that, we would have to manually annotate data. And
just to be clear to add, we do not in this project have access to any mobile phone records of the participants.
No. Which was the case.
For obvious, there's issues around privacy and whatever, but from a research perspective, it might be nice to have that, because then we would really have a handle on the reliability of some of these tools, and also a handle on the overall propensity of people to carry out phone tasks. Of course, we would still have to verify that it was that the driver, even if a phone was registered to the driver, that they hadn't handed it to a passenger to make the call and so on. So you can't rely on any one method. You always have to use complementary methods.
Then I have another question about if there is any other automatic annotation for other tasks. So no, it could be a good subject and very interesting, but we didn't go into that one because each kind of task has a specific way to be detected and specific algorithm can be used. Even the quality of the images and the fact that they are only black and white for the inside views, all that has to be taken into account to have good quality results. So each new task needs a new study to be detected.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I can add that here we're talking about automated coding. Some of this differentiation and distinction is actually quite hard to do even for a manual coding. So we're taking a lot of care when there are questions by the manual coders, when there's questions about their reliability, that we're confirming that we're getting reliable information. It's not always easy to see what a person is doing, particularly with glances to a screen and so on, because those can really be very, very short. Okay, I don't see any more questions unless you do, Laurette.
Okay, I don't neither.
Okay, so I'll then change the presenter back to me and show my screen. Oops. Went to the wrong place, of course. So this is the final question and answer session in this webinar. I'd really like to thank everybody for joining. I'd like to thank the people particularly that asked questions. I hope we were able to give satisfactory answers. You probably appreciate that we haven't given you analysis results in this webinar, and that actually is a deliberate decision. We want to make sure that we're not giving results on partial data. We're actually in the midst of doing the analysis. We want to make sure that that when we do present results, that we can at least stand up and claim them to be reliable and to encompass all the data that we're able to analyze. So we haven't taken the risk of giving you a preview of what the results might look like. But there is an opportunity coming up to ask us in more depth and to find out what the project conclusions are. And that's the final event from UDRIVE, which will take place in The Hague on June 8th to June 7th, and then will be followed by an international symposium on naturalistic driving research on June 8th and 9th. So there will be presentations about this work in both parts of that, both in the UDRIVE experience, which is the final event of the UDRIVE project, and in the symposium on naturalistic driving research. And we do indeed hope that some of you are able to come to that event and learn more about us and engage more with the project. So I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. I'd like to thank Laurette for her presentation. I'll thank the organizers behind the scenes at Ertico for making sure this all ran smoothly. And just so you know, we will be putting the slides we've presented on the website so that you can look at them at your leisure. Thank you very much, everybody.